I've seen terrible things in my life, but nothing had ever struck me straight in the heart like what I saw that day. At first, it was only a sound, a fragment of life, lost in the Oregon woods. It came out strangled, broken, as if a tiny throat were being crushed. I froze on the trail, my heart pounding wildly. Part of me wanted to believe it was only the wind slipping through the branches, but then it came again, weak, hoarse, like a last breath begging not to be forgotten. I turned, pushing through the brambles, and then I saw it. An old, torn duffel bag lay crumpled in the wet grass. It twitched, shuddering as though something inside was fighting against despair. I dropped to my knees, my hand trembling as it reached for the zipper. The hiss of metal cut through the silence, and my world broke apart. Inside, curled up and filthy, was a Doberman puppy, no more than 2, maybe 3 months old, so small I could have held it in both hands. Its body was skin and bone, its black and tan fur matted with mud and streaks of blood. Tiny legs were bound tight with rope, cut deep enough to bleed fresh and raw, and the eyes. God, those eyes. Wide, dark brown, brimming with fear and pain so raw it locked my chest in a vice. Its mouth opened, but instead of a bark, only a rasping whimper scraped out, then died in its throat. In that instant, I heard nothing else. No birds, no wind. Only the ragged breath of a small life, thin as a thread about to snap. I froze, my hand stiff on the zipper. Someone had thrown it here, tied it down, shoved it into a bag, left it to die in the dark. The thought made my blood boil, horror and fury colliding until my hands shook uncontrollably. I wanted to scream, but the sound lodged in my throat. All I could do was slip my shaking hand inside, touch the soaked, cold fur. It flinched, then yielded, its heavy eyes locking onto mine as if an invisible tether bound us together. I knew, if I turned away now, it would die, and that death would follow me for the rest of my life. I tore the bag open, slid my arms beneath the weightless body. It carried no more than skin stretched over bones, yet its labored breath beat against my palm, whispering one truth. It was still alive. It was still waiting. I pulled it tight against my chest. The small frame quivered like a leaf about to fall, leaving the stench of mud, blood, and fear pressed into my shirt. And in that moment, I swore. No one would take its final breath away from it. I dropped to my knees, breath ragged, chest on the verge of tearing open. The tiny body in my arms, just a Doberman pup, barely 3 months old, trembled like a leaf caught in the wind. Its black and tan coat, meant to shine, was tangled, smeared with blood and mud. The small legs were carved deep with rope marks. I pressed it against my chest, feeling every fragile, uneven breath, hot and cold, flickering like a thread of life about to snap. In that moment, I split in 2. One half screamed, "Walk away, Daniel." Set it down and get back to the main trail. You have a family, Rachel. 2 kids waiting by the lake. You can't risk everything for a dog. The other half, the weaker, trembling half, yet the truer one, whispered, "If you leave it here, that cry will follow you the rest of your life." I closed my eyes. The darkness behind my lids was no different from the forest pressing in. I saw myself at 10, standing in the backyard of the old house in Ohio. I remembered the smell of rust, my small hands working to untwist the wire from the neighbor's dog's leg. I remembered the wheezing breath and the warm tongue that licked my hand the moment it was freed. That was the first time I understood what it meant for a life to depend entirely on me. The first time I felt responsibility. Now, more than 30 years later, that memory slammed back into me like a hammer. Shadow. The name broke loose in my mind without thought, fixed its wet, pleading eyes on mine. And I knew, if I walked away, I would betray the boy I once was. But fear pressed down just as hard. Headlines flashed across my mind, traps set by twisted men, vanishings no one ever explained. What if this was a setup? What if I were next? I was 45 now, no longer reckless. I had a family to answer to. Rachel always said I was too soft, that I took on burdens that didn't belong to me. Her voice echoed in my head. "Daniel, you can't save everyone." I bent low, pressing my face into Shadow's cold, filthy coat. It let out a faint whimper so small, yet it crushed my chest. A broken sound, too weak to become a bark. It was so frail that the wind alone might carry it away. I tightened my hold, feeling the frantic stutter of its tiny heart against my palm. And I realized, if I didn't act now, it would die right here, in my arms. The thought cut through me like a blade. I opened my eyes, scanning the forest. The late-day light had turned grim. Brambles clawed at my pants like fingers refusing to let me go. Branches cracked beneath my boots like warnings. Everything around me whispered, "Turn back." But then I heard it, not from the woods, but from within my arms. A gasp of breath, weak and desperate. A last plea. My voice came out hoarse, breaking. "No, little one. You're not dying here. Not like this." I forced myself upright. My legs shook, my knees turned to rubber. The first step was heavy as lead. Each stride felt like dragging the forest itself behind me. But I didn't allow myself to stop. I knew if I paused, even for a second, I'd collapse with it in my arms. Images of my family flashed sharply in my mind. Rachel, eyes wide with worry, asks, "Daniel, what are you doing with your life?" Emily and Jacob ran to hug me, not understanding why their father's jacket reeked of blood and filth. I had promised to take them to watch the sunset by the lake. Instead, here I was carrying another fragile soul, one someone else had decided didn't deserve to live. The question cut into me, do I have the right to choose who lives and who doesn't? I knew the answer. No one has that right. And because of that, I kept moving. Thorns scratched deep into my hands, drawing thin lines of blood. But I never loosened my grip on Shadow. It twitched, then went limp again. Eyes squeezed shut, breath rattling like it was racing death itself. With every step I whispered, "Hold on, Shadow." Just a little longer. I didn't know if I was speaking to it or to myself. Maybe both. As the last shards of daylight broke through the canopy, my body felt drained to the bone. Yet inside, a small fire lit. The path before me had only one direction. No turning back. No leaving behind. If I had to carry it through the whole forest, if I collapsed at the trailhead, I would not set it down. I swore it, there in the heavy dark of Oregon. And so I stepped deeper into the shadows, clutching the fragile life to my chest, letting its broken breaths guide me out of that hell. I held Shadow tight in my arms, my heart pounding out of control. Every step along the trail stretched into a lifetime. The Oregon forest twisted into a maze, the last light of day swallowed whole. Branches cracked beneath my boots, thorns tore my clothes, but I felt nothing, only the fading breath of the pup dissolving in my embrace. I staggered onto the slope near the tree line. As the woods opened, the dim sky spilled across the damp earth. I dropped to my knees, dragging in air. Shadow was barely holding on, eyes half closed, head lolling as if the weight of life itself was too much. I pulled my jacket open, wrapped him tight, my hand rubbing against his tiny chest. I whispered, "Stay with me, little one. Don't give up. Don't leave me." That's when the deeper horror struck me. His body weighed almost nothing. Not just thin, but starved, stripped to the bone. His ribs jutted sharp as kindling, belly caved in, claws worn down as if he had clawed himself raw trying to escape that bag. Someone hadn't simply abandoned him. They had meant for him to die, slow, cruel, unseen. A heat rose in me, fierce and unshakable. I had never known rage like that, not a stranger in traffic, not at a boss behind a desk. This was primal fury, born when evil bares its teeth against something innocent and helpless. Jaw clenched, I lifted Shadow again. My old pickup was close. I bolted forward, slipping on wet ground, my heart hammering like war drums. His whimper pressed against my chest, faint as a whisper, "Don't leave me." When I laid him on the passenger seat, my whole body trembled. I yanked out my phone, fingers shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. I punched the number Rachel had saved for emergencies, the 24/7 clinic outside town. "Emergency veterinary clinic, this is Dr. Patel. What's your emergency?" The woman's voice was calm but urgent. I almost shouted, "I just found a puppy. Doberman too, maybe 3 months old. He was tied, stuffed in a bag, and he's dying. His breathing's shallow, his legs are injured. I don't know how much longer he has." "Sir, listen to me," she said, steady as stone. "Keep him warm. Wrap him in your jacket. Keep his head slightly raised. We're ready here. How far are you?" 15 minutes. If I drive flat out, then drive. Don't stop. We'll be waiting." I tossed the phone onto the seat and jammed the key into the ignition. The old Ford roared, headlights slicing the dark. I floored it, tires grinding gravel into a scream. The mountain road wound like a serpent, shadows pressing in. I held Shadow close, driving one-handed, whispering, "Hold on, Shadow. Just a little longer. I promise. I'll get you safe." But every glance at him tore me open. His eyes fluttered, sliding shut, lids heavy as stone. I had to shake him, call his name again and again. "Shadow! Hear me. Don't leave me. You hear?" The truck tore through curves, horns blaring as I cut past taillights, ignoring every law written on paper. None of it mattered. Every second could be his last. In my mind, I saw Emily and Jacob. I asked myself, if my kids saw this, a pup, bound and discarded, what would they think of this world? What would they think of a father who walked away from that cry? Number. I couldn't let that shadow stain them. Or me. Shadow stirred, a frail sound scraping from his throat. Tears burned my eyes. He was still fighting. This broken scrap of life refused to surrender. "Good boy," I whispered. "Keep fighting. We'll make it through together." A green neon glow broke the horizon. The clinic sign. My heart nearly burst. I slammed the gas, the truck jolting over potholes, throwing me against the wheel. I skidded to a halt at the entrance. 2 figures in white coats rushed out, wrenching the door open. "Bring him in! Hurry!" one shouted. I grabbed Shadow, sprinted inside. Fluorescent lights blazed down. The air reeked of antiseptic. My hands were ice, my chest locked in a vise. I set him on the steel table, and in an instant, skilled hands closed in around him. I staggered back, dizzy. For the first time since that cry in the woods, I let myself draw a full breath. And that breath broke into sobs. Because I knew, from this moment on, Shadow's fate was no longer mine to carry. He balanced between life and death on that shining table. And I, a middle-aged man who only meant to take a walk in the woods, had stepped into a battle I never chose, but could never walk away from. I stood frozen at the glass door, fingers laced so tight they went numb. Inside, under the sterile burn of fluorescent light, they laid Shadow on the metal table. His body looked so small it nearly disappeared against the white sheets. A nurse slid a tiny oxygen mask over his muzzle, and another slipped a needle into his fragile leg. The heart monitor crackled to life. Its beeps so slow, so uneven, I thought each one might be the last. I didn't dare blink. I feared that if I did, the screen would go dark, the line flattening into silence. A woman in a white coat, her nameplate read Dr. Patel, gestured firmly. "We'll do everything we can. Please wait outside." Her voice carried calm, but her eyes flickered with urgency. I nodded stiffly. My feet moved back on their own, spine pressed against the cold wall of the hallway. A row of plastic chairs sat behind me, but I couldn't sit. My whole body was strung tight, trembling from helplessness. I touched my chest, where the smell of blood and mud still clung heavily to my jacket. When I pulled Shadow from that bag, I hadn't thought of anything except saving him. But now, there was nothing left in my hands. He lay there, alone, his fate suspended in the hands of strangers. The slow beeping seeped through the door. I closed my eyes and let memory surge. Rachel, Emily, Jacob. I pictured them gathered around the dinner table at the cabin. Rachel checked her watch, irritated that I hadn't come home. Emily asks, "Where's Dad?" Jacob wanted to run to the gate and wait. And if I called them now, what could I say? That I'd been held back by a life someone else had already decided wasn't worth living? I wondered, did anyone else hear that cry in the woods? Had others walked past and chosen not to stop? The thought chilled me. If they had left Shadow to die. And if I left now, I would be no different. A sob clawed out of my throat. I covered my face, hot tears slipping through my fingers. How long had it been since I cried like that? Maybe since my father died, and yet the feeling was back. Loss, helplessness, the crushing knowledge that nothing I did could shift the tide. The door slammed open. A nurse rushed out, hair disheveled, sweat shining on her forehead. "We need more fluids, now!" She vanished again, leaving only the sharp sting of antiseptic trailing in the air. I gripped my head, sliding down the wall until I sat on the cold tile floor. I stared at my boots, caked with forest dust, and thought, just hours ago, I was a man on a hike, carrying jars of jam in my pack. Now I was here, waiting on a verdict for a life I hadn't even known existed that morning. I pulled out my phone, the screen blurred with tears. My fingers typed a message to Rachel. "Found a puppy. Badly hurt. At the vet. Don't wait for me." But I deleted it. How could a handful of words hold the truth clawing inside me? The beeping suddenly quickened, sharp and frantic. My head snapped up, my chest tightening. Through the half-open door, I glimpsed Dr. Patel, her hands pressing Shadow's chest with 2 fingers, steady, urgent. The image cut straight into me, a body small enough to fit in both palms, now being dragged back from the edge. I slammed both palms against the wall, whispering, "Please, please, don't let him go." It wasn't for her, it was to God, to the universe, to anything listening. Time broke apart. A minute? 5? A lifetime? Then Dr. Patel stepped out. Shadows under her eyes, sweat on her brow, but the faintest spark on her lips. "He's stable, for now," she said. My knees nearly buckled. I clung to the wall as tears surged again. This time, not just from fear, but from the fragile flare of hope. "Can I see him?" I asked, my voice raw. "Not yet. He needs rest, but stay. He knows you're here." I nodded, every muscle in me giving way. I sank into the chair, hands clasped tight, and for the first time in years, I prayed. Not for myself, not for my family, but for a tiny soul named Shadow, for the small life that had taught me some cries in this world can never be ignored, no matter the cost. I never thought a white-walled room, reeking of antiseptic, could become a place where every second crushed my chest with suspense. 3 days had passed since I carried Shadow in, and each moment I lived in fear that the steady beeping of the monitor would fall silent. For 3 nights, I hadn't left the hallway. The hard plastic chair carved into my back, but I didn't care. Each time the door swung open, I held my breath, bracing for bad news. I drank cold coffee, chewed on vending machine crackers, but none of it went down. The only thing that kept me awake was the image of Shadow, tiny, broken, still clinging to life. Dr. Patel would come by often, her eyes heavy with fatigue, but still lit with determination. "He's a fighter," she told me last night. "If he makes it through tonight, his chances go way up." Those words became the thread I clung to. I had never believed in chance so much in my life. This morning, when the first rays of sun slipped through the small window, a nurse beckoned me inside. My heart pounded as if it might split apart. I stepped in. The sharp scent of antiseptic hit my nose, the white light spilling down onto the steel table now covered with a soft blanket. And there he was, Shadow, still frail, but his chest rising and falling more evenly than before. I pulled a chair close, sat down, and let my hand rest against his bandaged leg. His body was still cool, but not frozen like that first night. Relief washed through me for the first time in days. And then it happened. Shadow's eyelids fluttered. I stopped breathing. For a second, I thought I had imagined it. But slowly, painfully, his eyes opened. Brown eyes, clouded, dim from fever and exhaustion, but fixed on me. Not drifting, not vacant. They saw me, my throat closed. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, voice trembling. "I'm here. You're safe now." He couldn't answer, only tilted his head weakly, ears drooping, and let out the faintest whimper, thin as a thread. Yet to me, it thundered like a cathedral bell. It meant one thing: he was still here. Tears slid down onto the back of my hand resting beside him. I remembered the forest, the cry that cut through the dark, the stench of blood and mud, the terror of unzipping that bag. All of it condensed into one question. If I had walked away that night, who would be here now? Shadow strained to lift his head, then brushed his tongue against my finger. Just a flicker, trembling, but it unraveled me. I laughed, though it broke apart into a sob. "You're tougher than me, kid," I whispered. Dr. Patel entered, her expression softening at the sight. "That's a good sign," she said. "He recognizes you. That bond will help his recovery more than any medicine." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. All I knew was I would never leave him again. For the hours that followed, I sat by his side, talking. I told him about Emily and Jacob, how they would tear around the yard when they saw him strong again. I told him about the cabin by the lake, how the sunset burned the water red-orange, and how one day he would run there, free. I wasn't sure he understood, but now and then those brown eyes blinked, as if he were listening. A nurse handed me a small syringe of liquid nutrition. "Try feeding him," she said. My hands shook as I placed it to his mouth. A drop slipped in. He swallowed, then another. My chest broke open. It was a miracle in motion. I dropped my forehead against the table, breath shuddering. The weight I'd carried for days shattered. "You're going to make it, Shadow," I whispered, almost a prayer. "I promise. I won't let you go." When night fell, I was still there. Outside, Portland hummed with lights and traffic. But in that little room, there were only 2 of us. A frail puppy who had just reclaimed his right to live, and I. Shadow had opened his eyes, and in them I saw not just a survival, but a bond that would change the rest of my life. I had never known the road home to feel so long. The tires hummed across rain-slick pavement, streetlights blurred into streaks, and in the car, Shadow lay curled in the thin blanket the clinic had given me. He slept, breath rattling but steady, and each glance in the rearview mirror brought the same fear, that his chest might stop rising. I didn't call Rachel ahead. I had no idea how to explain. She was used to my small surprises, an extra camping lantern, an old radio from a yard sale, but a skeletal puppy, dragged back from abuse, was something else entirely. When the truck turned onto the gravel drive that led to the lakeside cabin, the porch light was already on. I drew a deep breath. Emily and Jacob were surely inside the living room, laughing or arguing over some game. Rachel, I could picture her with arms crossed, eyes sharp as glass, waiting for my excuse. I pushed the door open, and Shadow pressed close against my chest. His fragile warmth felt like a shield against the storm about to break. "Daniel?" Rachel's voice cut from the kitchen. She stepped out, hair tied back, apron stained with tomato sauce. Her gaze fell to the bundle in my arms. "Oh my God. What is that?" My throat caught. This is Shadow. I found him in the woods. He was—" I broke off, the words choking. I couldn't put that bag, that scene, into the air in front of my wife and children. Emily, 13, rushed forward like a gust of wind. "A puppy!" Her eyes lit bright. Jacob, 3 years younger, barreled after her. "Can we keep him, Dad?" "Please?" Rachel flung an arm across them. "Stay back." He looked sick. Her voice turned sharp, her gaze locking on me. "Daniel, what were you thinking?" "We're not prepared for this. The house, the schedule, the money—" I cut in, the words bursting raw. "If you had seen him in the woods like I did, you couldn't have walked away." Silence slammed the room. Emily whispered, "He's so small," before dropping her eyes, afraid of her mother's glare. Jacob edged closer to me, his face soft with worry, eyes fixed on Shadow. Rachel folded her arms, studying me. "So what's your plan? Bring him home and hope for the best? We have 2 children. I don't want sickness or chaos in this house." I lowered myself into a chair and set Shadow gently onto a blanket in my lap. He whimpered, then burrowed his head against my hand. That small motion hit me harder than any blow. I looked back up at Rachel. "I know. But I couldn't leave him. He's alive only because someone didn't turn away. And if I turn away now, he'll die. I couldn't live with that." The air felt weighted, heavy as stone. Emily stepped closer, eyes wet. "Mom, please. He needs us." Jacob whispered, "He's like us, right? A family." Rachel turned aside, her face flickering. I caught the sigh, the one she gave when logic and heart waged war inside her. "Temporary," she said, voice still firm but softer. "You're responsible. Everything, food, medicine, cleaning. If he ruins something or causes trouble, it's on you." I nodded hard, almost breaking with relief. "Deal." Emily squealed, Jacob jumped, and I sat there trembling, clutching the little dog to my chest, the weight of a miracle in my arms. That night, as the house settled into silence, I lay on the sofa, Shadow curled in a blanket-lined box beside me. Each time his breathing hitched, I leaned down to check. His eyes stayed shut, his frail belly rose and fell, his faint breath mingling with the sound of rain tapping against the porch. I stared into the dark ceiling, tangled with doubt. I knew the trial was only beginning. Arguments would come, suspicion, judgment, from neighbors, maybe even from my own family. But then Shadow stirred, one tiny paw kicking at the air as if he were running in a dream. And in that instant, I knew one thing for certain. No matter what lay ahead, I would never regret stopping in the woods that night. Mornings at the cabin had never been like this. I used to wake to the alarm clock and the smell of Rachel's coffee. Now another sound pulled me from sleep, the tapping of tiny claws on wooden floors, followed by a warm head nudging the hand I'd let dangle over the bed. Shadow. He was no longer the fading soul inside a nylon bag in the forest. The wound on his leg had begun to heal. The bruises had vanished, and his black and tan coat shimmered in the morning light. He was still thin, but in those brown eyes burned a life, a spirit I had never seen in anything so small. Rachel kept her distance at first, but I caught her more than once, when she thought no one was watching, sitting by the window, gently stroking his back while he slept. The first time Shadow dragged himself over and rested his head on her lap, she startled, yet she didn't push him away. She let him stay, sighing softly before a tired smile crossed her face, the kind I hadn't seen in years. Emily clung to Shadow like a shadow of her own. She set her alarm an hour early just to walk him outside, even with frost still heavy on the grass. Jacob turned the living room into a miniature park with rubber balls and little ropes. Laughter filled the house more often now, a sound I'd forgotten after too many months of busyness and strain. One evening, as the fire cracked in the hearth and the family gathered close, Shadow stretched out in the center, his head resting on Jacob's knee. Rachel watched the children, then turned to me. "You know," she said softly, "maybe he came at the right time." I nodded, my throat tight. I thought back to that night in the forest, surrounded by fear and dark, standing at the edge of choice, leave or stay. If I had chosen the easier path, I wouldn't be here now, watching the quiet change unfold in the people I loved most. Shadow hadn't just survived. He had become a bridge. He reminded me who I was, a father, a husband, and above all, a man who could not look away from pain. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I stepped onto the porch. The Oregon sky stretched wide, scattered with stars. Shadow padded after me, sat close, pressed against my leg. I laid my hand on his back, felt the warmth alive under my palm. "We made it, buddy," I whispered. He lifted his head, brown eyes reflecting the starlight, and in that moment I understood. We had stepped into a new journey, not mine alone, not his, ours as a family. Shadow had been saved that night in the woods, but in truth, he had saved us too. If a fragile pup like Shadow could claw back life from the edge of death, then maybe we can all learn never to turn away from suffering. Have you ever opened your arms to save a small life? If you have, share your story in the comments, so together we can prove that compassion still lives. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share this video so no shadow is ever left behind again. Because every life, no matter how small, deserves love.